It's February 2026, Milano, Italy. Ilia Malinin, the quad god, steps onto the ice. He's undefeated for 2 years, world champion, Grand Prix champion, team event gold medalist, and the favorite to win Olympic gold. And then he falls, twice. The entire world watches as one of the greatest technical skaters in history crumbles under the weight of one word: perfection. Later, he posts on Instagram. On the world's biggest stage, those who appear the strongest may still be fighting invisible battles on the inside. I'm Christine Reeves-Bolesne, and this is the Anti-Fragile Mindset. Today, the perfectionism trap, when good enough feels like failure. Let's talk about the difference between excellence and perfection, and why one builds you up and the other destroys you. In our first segment, we're going to talk about what perfectionism really is. And it's not about high standards. Here's what most people get wrong about perfectionism. They think it's about having those really high standards for themselves, being detail-oriented, caring about quality. But perfectionism isn't about excellence at all. It's about fear. Fear of judgment, fear of mistake, fear of being seen as not good enough. And in figure skating, that fear is everywhere because everything you do is judged. Your jumps, your artistry, your expression, your body, your face, your costume. Every mistake is visible. Every stumble is scored. Every fall is recorded. And for some skaters, the fear of making a mistake becomes bigger than the desire to perform. Ilia Malinin said it perfectly after his Olympic meltdown. All the traumatic moments of my life started flooding my head right before I took the ice. It overwhelmed me. I had no control. That's what perfectionism does. It floods your brain with fear, and fear shuts down performance. Isabeau Levito, US champion, world medalist, she described the mental toll of trying to repeat her title. She said, "A month after I won nationals, I was already thinking about how stressed I would be for the next nationals. I felt like not winning would be losing something." Wow, listen to that language. Not winning would be losing something. That's perfection. When second place feels like failure, when good feels like losing. And here's the brutal truth. Perfectionism doesn't make you better, it makes you worse. Because when you're terrified of making a mistake, your body tenses, your brain overthinks, and you create the very mistake you're trying to avoid. I know this because I lived it. Paris, the Lido Cabaret show on the Champs-Élysées, one of the most famous performance venues in the world. My partner and I were starring in an $18 million brand new show. The ice surface, 10 feet by 10 feet. The audience dining 2 feet from the edge of the ice. During a dinner break before opening night, the dancers, crew, directors, owners of the club were all in the dining room, feet from the ice, eating their dinners and watching. And my partner and I were allowed the time to practice on the ice surface. I felt like every eye was on us. I could see the dancers pointing, talking amongst themselves. And what did my brain do? Well, it filled in the blanks. They think we don't belong here. They're judging every move we make. We're not good enough for this show. I became obsessed with being flawless. I made my partner redo a lift over and over again. I even snapped at him. I couldn't enjoy what should have been one of the best and most exciting experiences of our lives because I was so terrified of looking like an imposter, that I didn't belong. Opening night arrived. The audience, a who's who of Paris, famous actors, politicians, every designer from Chanel to Dior, every major fashion house was there. And I was so afraid of being seen as less than, that I had thoughts of taking off my skates and literally running out the door, leaving my partner to do a solo. Of course I didn't. I sat there, I pulled myself together, I breathed. And because I couldn't live with myself, if I didn't show some sort of courage. And I couldn't possibly have left him out there. So we went out, we skated, not perfectly, but well, until we were almost done. Because of the tightness in my body and the tension from trying to be perfect, we had one of our final lifts, and the exit was a toss, rotation, and a catch. My blades on the exit caught my partner down his thighs. I cut him, not life-threatening, but deep enough to slice his pants, and a 5-inch gash in his thigh with blood dripping down. I could hear the gasps from the audience, and there, a gaping hole in his costume, and we had to finish that way. I was mortified and panicked on his health and well-being. Well, the audience gave us polite clapping at the end, and there was so much murmuring. The very thing I feared the most, making a catastrophic mistake in front of the most elite audience imaginable, happened. And here's what I learned that day. My need for perfection was the very thing that caused the disaster. Had I stayed calm, had I trusted the training, had I focused on performing instead of trying to be perfect, we would have been fine. But I didn't. And perfectionism sabotaged me. That is the moment I will never get back. In segment 2, let's talk about why perfectionism sabotages your performance. And it's the brain science actually behind the freeze we're going to talk about. So why does this happen? Why does the need to be perfect actually make us worse? So let's look at that science. When you're performing, skating, presenting, competing, whatever you're doing, your brain relies on something called procedural memory, muscle memory, automated movement. You've done the jump 1,000 times. Your body knows what to do. But when perfectionism kicks in, when you start thinking, don't mess up, everyone's watching, this has to be flawless, like I did, your brain shifts from procedural memory to conscious control. And conscious control is slow, it's hesitant, it's second guesses. Figure skaters call this popping a jump. You're midair and suddenly you think, oh, that takeoff didn't feel right, and your body freezes. Ilia Malinin experienced this at the Olympics. He said his mind was flooded with traumatic memories right before he performed, and he lost control. That's what perfectionism does. It hijacks your brain. Isabeau Levido described it perfectly. I realized that listening to music before a competition stressed me out even more. I needed a quiet mind because once you're on the ice, the light is so bright, it's so overwhelming, overstimulating. She was describing sensory overload when your brain is already maxed out trying to be perfect. Any additional stimulus becomes completely overwhelming. And here's the other thing perfectionism does. It makes you avoid risk. Because if you're terrified of making a mistake, well, you don't want to try new things. You don't push those boundaries. You play cautious, you play it safe. But playing it safe in most sports, well, that's how you lose. The improvement comes through risk. Judges reward difficulty. Growth happens when you risk making errors. But perfectionism tells you, don't try the harder jump, you might fall. Don't attempt that quad, stick with the triple. Don't do that double, do the single. Don't take the risk, play it safe. And then you watch other skaters, other athletes who are willing to fail and they pass you by. Gracie Gold wrote an entire memoir about this. She titled it, Out of Shape, Worthless Loser. And that was the voice in her head. That voice told her she was never good enough, never thin enough, never perfect enough. And it nearly killed her. And oh, can I relate to those thoughts and feelings? In 2017, she entered treatment, not just for an eating disorder, but for suicidal ideation. Because perfectionism doesn't just sabotage your performance, it sabotages your life. Gracie said, the pressure of training for years with coaches who accepted nothing less than gold finally took its toll. Nothing less than gold. That's the perfectionism trap. When second place feels like failure, when good isn't good enough, when your worth is tied to flawless execution, and your brain eventually says, I can't do this anymore. In segment 3, we're going to talk about the skater who broke free of that perfectionism trap. Alysa Liu's radical shift. But here's the thing. Perfectionism isn't inevitable. Some skaters figure out actually how to break free, and Alysa is one of them. At 16, she retired from figure skating. She competed at the 2022 Olympics, won national titles, and achieved everything she had worked for. And then she walked away. Why? Because in her words, she felt like a puppet. Young girls are trained to hide their feelings, smile no matter what, and never show weakness. I completely lost myself, she said. She described the sport as a robot culture, and she wanted no part of it. But in 2024, she came back, and this time she did it on her terms. And she chose her own music, she controlled her own hours, and she set strict boundaries. And most importantly, she stopped tying her worth to the color of the medal. And at the 2026 Olympics, after winning gold, she told reporters, I don't need this medal. What I needed was the stage to perform. And I got that. No matter what happened, I knew I would be fine. Listen to that again. I don't need this medal. No matter what happened, I would have been fine. That's not apathy, laziness. That's freedom. Freedom from the belief that your worth depends on a flawless performance. Alysa also said, before I didn't feel connected to my programs because I didn't create them. Now I am proud of them and I want to share. Nothing can get to me anymore because I don't seek outside approval. That last line is everything. I don't seek outside approval. And this is what perfectionism is. It's driven by external validation. What will people think? What will the judges say? What if I'm not good enough in their eyes? But when you stop seeking that outside approval, when you perform for yourself, not for them, the pressure lifts. And ironically, you perform better because your brain isn't flooded with that fear anymore. Your body isn't tense. Your movements are fluid. Alysa skated with joy and she won gold, not because she chased perfection, but because she let it go. As we go into our segment 4, and we talk about what actually helps, well, it's trading perfectionism for performance. So if perfectionism sabotages performance, what actually helps? Number 1, redefine the mistake. A mistake isn't a disaster, it's data. When I cut my partner's leg in Paris, that wasn't proof I didn't belong there. It was proof I was too tense. And tension, that's fixable. Mistakes teach you what to adjust. They're not evidence you're not good enough. They're evidence you're human and learning. 2, focus on the next 10 seconds. Perfectionism makes you think about the entire performance. I have to nail this whole program. I have to nail this speech. I can't mess up anywhere. That's overwhelming. Instead, shrink your focus. Not, I have to do everything perfectly, but I'm going to land this jump. I'm going to give this paragraph. Not, I have to do everything perfectly, but I'm going to focus on this next 10 seconds, this next jump, this next paragraph, this next moment. I'm going to focus on that right now. Then move to the next. Isabel Levito described this. I've been learning to think element to element rather than catastrophizing about a potential mistake. Element to element, moment to moment, not the whole program, not the whole presentation, just the next 10 seconds. 3, ownership. In figure skating, you don't get retakes. You perform once, and it's rarely perfect. But here's the secret. The audience doesn't notice most mistakes, and most admire an athlete that gets back up. What they notice is, did you commit? Did you perform with confidence? Did you recover when something went wrong? Did you show how much you love your sport? At the Lido, after I cut my partner, we didn't stop. We finished. Was it perfect? No, but we showed up. We performed. We did not quit. And honestly, that mattered more than a flawless program. Although at the moment, in that moment, I certainly didn't think that. 4, Separate your worth from your performance. And this is, frankly, the hardest one, because for years you've been told how well you skate equals how valuable you are, how good you are. But that's not true. Your worth doesn't disappear when you fall. Your worth doesn't increase when you win gold. Alysa Liu figured this out. I don't need this medal. Did her worth change? No. Did it open up opportunities that she may not have had? Sure. But I believe those opportunities that she has now coming to her are because of the way she skated, free, with joy, not that she skated flawlessly or won gold. Gracie Gold had to learn it the hard way. She said, I had to trade perfection for peace. Remember, you are not your performance, you're not your scores, and you're not your mistakes. Those things are part of your life. They are not all of your life. And 5, practice failing. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but perfectionism makes you afraid to fail. So you need to practice failing on purpose. Try the jump you're scared of. Fall. Get back up. Stand in front of someone that you know. Give your presentation. Stumble. It's okay. Get back up. Try again. Fall again. Stumble again. And get back up. Eventually, your brain learns falling isn't the end of the world. And when falling isn't catastrophic, you stop being paralyzed by the fear of it. That's how you break the perfectionism trap. You prove to yourself, I can fail, and I'm still okay. If you're caught in the perfectionism trap right now, you're not alone. I work with athletes and business professionals on exactly this: how to perform under pressure, under judgment, without freezing. How to let go of perfectionism and chase excellence instead. How to separate your worth from your performance. So book a free 20-minute call, and you'll find that at christinereeves.ca/coaching. Or download my free guide, 3 Mental Toughness Techniques for Recovery and Setbacks. You can find that at christinereeves.ca/freebies. My book, Glitz and Grit Beyond the Spotlight, is about this. What happens when the need to be perfect sabotages everything you've worked for, and how to rebuild from there. And you can find that at Indigo, Chapters, Barnes & Noble, online everywhere, or at christinereeves.ca. Here's what I want you to remember. Perfectionism isn't about high standards. It's about fear. Fear of judgment, fear of mistakes, fear of being seen as not good enough. And that fear doesn't make you better. It makes you worse. Because when you're terrified of making a mistake, your brain floods, your body tenses, and you create the very mistake you're trying to avoid. I learned this in Paris. Ilia learned this in Milan. Gracie Gold learned this the hardest way possible. But Alysa Liu figured it out. You don't need to be perfect to be valuable. You don't need a flawless performance to belong. And you don't need the approval of every person watching. What you need is the courage to show up, the willingness to try, and the resilience to get back up when you fall, and the wisdom to know done is better than perfect. I'm Christine Reeves-Belesne, and this is the Anti-Fragile Mindset. Next week, when everyone else is doing better than you, how to handle that comparison anxiety when your training mates, your competitors, your colleagues are all progressing or doing better than you. Until then, be brave enough to be imperfect. See you next week.